Hello everyone and welcome back to another video on this channel. Today is going to be the first of a little mini series of videos of showing my bookshelves. It's been a little while since I have done a bookshelf tour, and I feel like every time I record a bookshelf tour video, my books have just completely moved around the house, and this is no different. The last bookshelf tour I recorded, my bookshelves were in the living room over there. Since then, I've had a baby, and having all of my books easily accessible to pull off the walls is not the best idea. And so I ended up converting a little corner in my bedroom into a little library area. So I would say 90% of my books are upstairs, and that is going to be a whole video in itself because there's a lot of reorganizing and decluttering of those shelves. Then I also have all of my kind of children's books from childhood, and a lot of children's books that I've collected or been given to my daughter Ivy in her nursery. So I'm going to film a video about that as well. But today I wanted to show probably my most fun and interesting bookshelf, and that is my classics, vintage, kind of collectible bookshelf, which I have here in the living room. Eventually what I want to do is get actual shelves like fitted into the alcoves, just like two on either side of the fireplace, high up, out of reach, but fixed into the walls and display them that way. That's the long-term goal. But for now we have this bookshelf here. This bookshelf is from IKEA. It's not the Billy bookshelf. It's not as deep as the Billy bookshelf and not as wide. And it has 5 shelves, but I've only filled the top 4. The bottom one just currently houses blankets and wires and cables, so I'm not going to show you the bottom shelf. I'm going to show you each individual book I have, talk about some key ones, and give you a little overview of the shelves. If I stand on my tiptoes, you can see me. So this is the top shelf, and I have my plant hanging here. This plant was from IKEA about 2 years ago, and when I bought it, it literally, like, the length of the vines were about this length. Can you see that? You can't see that. But it has grown so much, and I've taken cuttings of this plant, and yeah, it's gone a little bit all over the place, but I kind of love it. So that just sits on the top of my shelves, framing the top with the leaves. So first of all, we have my penguin cloth bound books, and I started collecting these a couple of years ago. Actually, the first one I ever got, I bought, I think nearly 10 years ago now. Yeah, 10 years ago, because I bought this when I was 18, and that is this bind up of Shakespeare's sonnets and poems, and this is a really special one because it was from Shakespeare and Company, which I went to Paris for my 18th birthday, and I bought this from Shakespeare and Company, which is very special. So that was the first one I ever bought, and then I never bought any more until probably a couple of years ago when my parents bought me these for Christmas. So we have Jane Eyre, The Tenant of Wildfell Hall, Wuthering Heights, and Villette. So then also the cloth bound books, I have The Picture of Dorian Gray, Frankenstein, Persuasion, and Tess of the D'Urbervilles. Then next on these shelves we have 2 of the vintage classics, I think they are, and I love these because they're paperbacks, but they have little flaps inside, and they're kind of smaller and shorter, and the pages are really thick. These are my favourite classics so far that I've owned for annotating, because you can highlight and write in them without it leaking through the pages. So the first one I have is another copy of Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. You'll notice that there's a few repeat copies of some of my favourite books, and one of those is Jane Eyre. And the second one is To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. I also have this little bell, which is like a lamppost. I have one copy of the Chiltern classics, which I absolutely love these classics. I got this for Christmas, and this is The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett, which is one of my favourite children's stories. And then finally on this top shelf, I have the Harper Muse edition of Anne of Green Gables, which if I take the sleeve off is possibly the most beautiful book that I own. I absolutely love the illustrations on this. Has gold pages and has pages with artwork inside as well. Okay, I'm gonna stay out of shot for this one because there is no way I can include myself in this clip and not block the whole bookshelf. So I will just grab the books and show you. The first thing I have on the shelf is this little plant. I bought this from the Duchy of Cornwall nursery, I want to say 2 years ago, and it was just in a little tiny, like really tiny nursery pot, and it was like £2. It's almost died a few times and I have managed to just about revive it, but it's not looking the most healthy. And this pot was actually one of the first presents Johnny ever bought me when we were going out, so that's very special and sits here in the corner, but I'm going to move it there so I can show you the first books. So first of all, I have my Agatha Christie collection. I have Murder of the Orient Express, Crooked House, The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, Death on the Nile. I think these are reprints of the original hardcover art of the books, or at least old cover art, but they've reprinted it in modern editions. And then probably my favourite, And Then There Were None. Then we have there's two more Agatha Christie books, but they're here. I'll show you those in a moment. I then have my Daphne du Maurier collection. First one is this 80th anniversary edition of Rebecca. Then have one of the Virago Modern Classics editions of Frenchman's Creek, which was the first Daphne du Maurier book I read and was the reason I ended up falling in love with her books. This vintage edition of Jamaica Inn, which I got from a local bookshop here in Cornwall. If you have a holiday in Cornwall, definitely check out charity shops and secondhand bookshops because you will always find nice editions of Daphne du Maurier books. I like this copy of The House on the Strand. And then finally, My Cousin Rachel. We then have my Penguin, I don't know what these are called, but they're the old Penguin books that you can often find in secondhand bookshops. I have two Agatha Christie's. We have The Labours of Hercules and Parker Pine Investigates, which are both short story collections. A copy of The Great Gatsby, The Day of the Triffids by John Wyndham. I just noticed this has some writing on the top. I don't know what that says. Another copy of Anne of Green Gables and My Memories of Six Reigns by Princess Mary Louise. I then have these editions of The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, The Two Towers, and The Return of the King. Alice in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. Another copy of The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald, which is in fact blackout poetry from when that was a thing. Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. Mansfield Park by Jane Austen. Another copy of Anne of Green Gables. Tales from the Arabian Nights and Moonfleet by J. Mead Faulkner. And then we have two vintage editions of Jane Eyre and Wuthering Heights. Moving on to the third shelf, I have this big bind up of F. Scott Fitzgerald's works. I'd Die For You and Other Lost Stories by F. Scott Fitzgerald. The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald, which was also bought from Shakespeare and Company. Basil and Josephine, which to me is one of the most underrated collections of short stories by F. Scott Fitzgerald. I absolutely loved reading these short stories. This Side of Paradise, and another of Fitzgerald's short story collections, The Intimate Strangers and Other Stories. I also love these are the Alma Classics editions, and again they're paperbacks with little flaps inside, and I really like these ones. Another copy of The Great Gatsby. This is the movie tie-in edition, which was actually the copy that I read the book in. I then have 3 of the Penguin modern classics: The Curious Case of Benjamin Button and 6 Other Stories by F. Scott Fitzgerald, One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich by Alexander Solzhenitsyn, and one of my favourite modern classics, The Day of the Triffids by John Wyndham. The Sun Also Rises by Ernest Hemingway, 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. These are 2 I picked up recently, and these are 2 Georgette Heyer books. I've not read them. I haven't actually read anything by Georgette Heyer, but let me know which one you'd recommend starting with, because I really want to read some of her works. The first one I have is Cousin Kate, and the second one is Lady of Quality. I then have 2 of Shakespeare's plays just wedged in randomly with my vintage books here. Those are A Midsummer Night's Dream and Othello. Moving back onto the vintage book, because I have this copy of The Hunchback of Notre Dame by Victor Hugo. I really love The Hunchback of Notre Dame, however I did not read it in this translation. There are multiple translations of this book, and this is one of those translations that is not very favoured. So I didn't actually end up reading this. I ended up reading it on Kindle. This tiny little pocket-sized bind-up of the works of Shakespeare. This is volume VII, so volume 7, and it has a little ribbon. Troilus and Cressida, Coriolanus, Titus Andronicus, and Romeo and Juliet. This one I actually have facing backwards because the binding is broken, but this is a copy of Where the Rainbow Ends and The Poetical Works of Milton. Finally on this shelf, bind up of Thomas Hardy's Tess of the D'Urbervilles, Mayor of Casterbridge, and Far from the Madding Crowd. This was my mum's that she won when she was at school from a school prize, and gave it to me when I first started really getting into classics when I was younger. I think that'll have to do. First up we have A Study in Scarlet and the Hound of the Baskervilles by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. This is a Reader's Digest version. The Complete Grimm's Fairy Tales. Bind up of 7 novels by Jane Austen. I bought this when I decided I wanted to read Jane Austen's books and did not think about how impractical it would be to read this tome, but I've kept it because it's so pretty. Then some actual readable versions of Jane Austen's novels. Let's get these out. I'll show you each cover. Mansfield Park, Sense and Sensibility, Emma, Persuasion, I think this is my favourite one, Northanger Abbey, and Pride and Prejudice. Then have my annotated version of Pride and Prejudice. I did a whole reading vlog where I read this for the first time and annotated it. My childhood copies of The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett and A Little Princess. And then we have 2 of the Penguin English Library editions. I really like these editions. I would like to pick up more, but they're just the kind of things I look out for in charity shops. And that is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and North and South, which is one of my favourite books. And then the final thing that's down here is my Bible. This is my journaling Bible. As you can tell, it's very battered and old. I have had this for a very, very long time. This just sits here on my shelf to remind me to read it each day. Particularly at the moment being on maternity, I feel like my life just doesn't really have a lot of routine. So I just read, I try and do a daily Bible reading just whenever I get a chance to. So having it easily accessible helps me to remember to do that. I'm not saying I'm perfect at doing that every day, but it's there to remind me. So those are all of the books on my classics vintage bookshelf. I hope you enjoyed having a peruse through my shelves with me, As I said, I'm going to be making this a little mini series, so I will be filming all of the other books that are scattered around the house in upcoming videos. I might do them once a month just to space it out. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you very soon with another video.